All right, I think we're on. I'm sitting here at the edge of the barn where I normally do these, and for some reason the flies are loving landing on the end of these round bales. So I might have to end up moving if they are bothering me too much. But thank you guys for showing up. And yeah, no video today. That's kind of why we're here. I was filming a little bit yesterday, but man, have you ever had one of those days where it's just like nothing goes according to plan? Everything you try to do just kind of gets messed up, and it was hot. I was getting frustrated, and yeah, so here we are today. Can you guys hear me all right? I just assume you can. Yeah, it is a little bit windy out here, but I think we're gonna be all right. So, okay, good. Now the answers are rolling in. Awesome. A little low. Okay. Let me try moving a little bit closer. It's just gonna be a much bigger face that you got to look at, but that's all right, I guess. Cool. So fall is rolling in, man, and I'm certainly starting to feel it around here. Not only does the weather start to change and the days are getting shorter, but I'm starting to feel what I call like the fall crunch. You know, there's a handful of things that really need to get done before fall is like officially here. And I just feel like I don't really have a lot of those things finished. Like I don't even have all the hay moved back over here into the yard. And that's something that's going to need to happen within hopefully the next couple weeks. I can get that done. I've got a bunch of the big 6-foot round bales that I'll be bringing back over here, and honestly don't really have a great spot to put them at the moment. So I don't know, I might end up like right now I'm in my hay yard, not in the barn. I've got everything just stacked up end to end in a single layer. But what I might have to end up doing is making like a small pyramid or a couple of small pyramids, and then either covering those with the tarp or just feeding them out kind of like as fast as I can once we do start feeding hay. So I'm excited to get going with the bale grazing this year. I'm going to do it a little bit differently than I've done in years past, as I've mentioned before. And I think a critical part of that is going to be the bale unroller that I've spoke about. Oh, I just saw someone mention rice straw. Yes, if I get the opportunity to bale it, I'm gonna do it, but I'm not sure. It depends on several things. I'm sure that the landowner around me will let me do it if you know, I don't see why he would say no. But the risk that I guess I could be running with rice straw is if they harvest the rice and the fields are wet, then I will not be able to get out there to bale, because what happens is when the combines and the bank out wagons are going through there, they leave really big ruts and you just can't bale rice straw on top of that. So assuming I can find a dry check somewhere, I do plan to bale some rice straw, probably more than I did last year. I think last year I did, man, I don't remember now. It was only like 10 bales. It wasn't very many. And I think I wouldn't have a problem doing twice that much, or maybe even more, just kind of depending. But I will want to get my hands on a hay rake, either buy one or borrow one or something, because what I did learn with that rice straw is it's really a lot better to rake it up into windrows before I try to bale it. It dries it out a little bit more, but then it's also just easier to bale, because you know these balers aren't really designed to just pick everything up on the ground. They're really more designed to pick up a windrow. So but yeah, kind of off on a tangent here. What was I talking about? Something about round bales, I'm sure. Oh, the bale unroller. So I left a poll and many of you guys voted, which I really appreciate. It was more than I actually thought would vote. So that was good to see, and it looked like most of you, I think it was like 60 to 70%, were saying to go with the 3-point style bale unroller. And honestly, I think I would rather build that one. It seems like it would be more fun to build. But I keep going back and forth, and then somebody said, well, why not just make yourself both? And I kind of thought about that, and I thought, yeah, maybe having both would be the way to go, because really each one is going to be better in certain circumstances, and maybe just like leave the tow behind one here. That way, if I happen to be here on a four-wheeler or whatever, I can use it, but then also have the 3.1 available. The part that I kind of am a little hesitant with the tow behind is that to get it out into the field, a lot of times I'm going to have to be driving through mud. So if I use the tow behind style, it's going to have fairly tall tires on it, I guess, to make it work, or to be able to go through the mud without, I just don't want to drag the bale through the mud. That's a wasp. Flies are annoying, but wasps I really don't want to be sitting with. So yeah, maybe just building both is the way to go. And actually, I'm gonna carry you guys over here and show you something, because 3-point style bale unroller, I would have to go buy stuff, steel, hydraulic cylinders, and then maybe some bearings for the actual rollers. But the Greg Judy style, I call it that just because that's, I don't know if he invented it or made it more popular or what the deal was, but it's the tow behind style. I think I've got enough steel with this thing to make a tow behind one. It's got hubs, it's got tires, which I think the tires would be maybe too small, but these hubs, I could put different wheels on them, and I think there's enough metal here to do it. I'll have to cut this frame apart to make it work, but that's, I think that's an option. I gotta see where Callie got off to. 1 second. Callie! Get over here. Come on. Okay. So yeah, I think all the parts are sitting there. The downside, and I know it's windy up here, I'm gonna get back over to the barn. Hopefully you'll be able to hear me better up there. I was planning to make a mobile hen house out of all that steel. Could use the tires, use the hubs, all that stuff. And I don't think I would have to buy much except for the wood to actually build the hen house on top of it. But my thought was to take all that and just kind of make like a cart, or running gear, I guess would be a better way to think of it. Kind of like, you see that all the time, like in the Midwest. Evan, Pete, those guys, they get running gear like that, and they can make feed wagons out of them. They can make, you can make anything out of them, really. But so the mobile hen house would be the same idea as like if you've seen on Just a Few Acres farm. Pete's got really big ones. I don't need one that big. I think mine would be, whatever size that frame is, and just be enough for like maybe 20 to 30 layer hens. But the advantage to having something like that is just that, like where I've got my layer hens now, I want to move them, but it's very difficult the way it's set up, because if I move those hens, I basically have to go catch each one and put it in a kennel or something like that. And if I had a mobile hen house that they just went in there at night to roost or to sleep, then you just go out there at 10 o'clock at night, lock the door, and then the next morning you can wheel that around and put those chickens wherever you want. So that would be handy at home. But then I have mixed feelings about this. I want to start doing more of like the regenerative practices. I think I think that's kind of the direction that I want to move with some things where it makes sense at least. And one thing that I've seen people do is bring chickens behind the cows. I think this was made more popular by Joel Salatin. But the problem for me is that I think the number of chickens that I would need to run behind the cows would be like more than I could handle. So I'm not really sure that that's a great idea to try to implement here. But maybe in one of the smaller pastures, you know, we could just kind of try it and see if there's anything to that. But anyway, I'm jumping all over the place here. So going back to the bale on roller, I'm thinking about making both, but we'll see. I might just do the 3-point style for now, because I think that is going to be the one that I would use more if I had both. And then, you know, down the road somewhere, we could always make a tow behind if it ends up being, you know, something that I think I need. But really, I see a place for both, you know, and then maybe even leaving one like up at the steer pasture, because I do feed hay out there in the wintertime. So far, I've fed hay up there out of feeders, but you know, we don't know what the future holds. I might end up trying to stock more there through the winter time and rolling hay out. I'm not really sure. So anyway, so yeah, the weed wiper, yeah, that's actually another thing that I did want to talk about, because I have started accumulating parts for the weed wiper, and I've more or less settled on a design as far as how I want to mount the drum, how I want to mount the spray tank, and all of that. But there are a few things that are still kind of tripping me up. The main one being the drum itself. I think what I had envisioned was using like 12-inch PVC pipe and then wrapping it with some sort of absorbent material. I think the PVC pipe would be good because it's non-corrosive, and just by the nature of how that would be used, it's always going to be getting spray on it, water, spray, all that stuff's corrosive. I don't think steel would last very long unless you did stainless steel, and now you're talking about big bucks. So PVC is a good compromise. It would be fairly strong enough for what we're doing, and it wouldn't be corrosive. But a couple things. The absorbent material to wrap that pipe with, I still just don't know what that would be. I've looked at like wick rope, and I thought about just like winding wick rope around that, almost like winch cable onto a drum. But the wick rope that I found, at least, was so expensive that just was not going to happen. The one weed wiper that have been looking at that's already being manufactured by a company, they put some sort of, they just call it carpet. So I don't know if that means like carpet that you would put in your house, outdoor carpet. I'm not really sure exactly what they put on there, but they just wrap carpet around the drum, and I guess that's enough to hold the spray on the drum while you're going. But the thing that I've been thinking about with a wiper, especially if you're in a really thick infestation like what I've got with the smut grass, is that the wiper is just going to kind of push a lot of that down, and you're not going to get a very good application on a lot of that. And I think that's why a lot of people say they don't work, is because, you know, if that target weed is too thick, a wiping drum is just not, it's not going to contact it. So then I started thinking, well, how could we fix that problem? How could we solve that problem? And my solution, or one of them, well, the first thing I thought of would be using like a big brush, like what I've got out here in the corral for the cows to rub on. If you could find something like that and spray the chemical on that as it's rolling, then the bristles would kind of like go through that grass almost like a comb going through your hair, I guess would be the way to think of it. and I think you would get a more complete application. The problem with those brushes is that they are plastic, so um, they're not going to absorb anything. So then I started thinking, well, what else could we use that's similar to that? And I thought, what about like the fingers on a chicken plucker? It's a little rubber finger about the size of my pinky that would snap into that plastic drum, and it should have a similar effect. As it's rolling, it's kind of combing those fingers through the grass, therefore getting more material applied to the target plant. And I think that could work. Um, and then maybe like go through the drum, put a bunch of those fingers on there, and then wrap some kind of like absorbent material in between them. I don't know. I still haven't like landed on the idea that's gonna be the one, And I've built enough things, and I've thought about how to build enough things that I know. I gotta keep thinking about it, and when the solution presents itself, I think I'll know it. But so that's the weed wiper. That's we're kind of making progress. I feel like I'm closing in on the answer for that. But I had another idea too, because I don't really like the idea of when guys run weed wipers, what they'll do is they apply, and if you don't know what a weed wiper is, I should probably explain it just briefly. But basically, you have a rotating drum behind your tractor. As the drum rotates, you got a spray boom on top of that that's spraying chemical down onto the drum. Well, you assume that your weeds that you don't want are much taller than your desirable grasses because the cattle have grazed them right down to the ground, let's say. And like in my case, the smut grass is, 2 feet taller than that. So you're wiping this drum over that tall smut grass, and this way, what's really cool about it is that you're applying chemical only to the things you want to hurt. Whereas like when I field spray my hayfield, I'm spraying 2,4-D on everything out there. And the 2,4-D doesn't hurt my crop. It does hurt the broadleaf that's growing out there, but you're applying that to everything. So in a way, it's kind of wasteful because you're spraying spray on stuff that you don't want to harm. And that's what's so cool about a weed wiper, is that you're only applying that material to the things that you're going after. And then, right, I just saw that in the chat there. You're also only putting that material on things that the cows don't want to eat. So it's kind of a win-win in that way. So yeah, that essentially, in a nutshell, that's what a weed wiper is. But what people will do to kind of like make these work better is they'll spray a concentrate of Roundup that is at like 50 to 70% was some of the numbers that I was seeing. To put that in perspective, usually with Roundup, you're only doing like 1.5 ounces per gallon. And what does that come out to? It's like it's either, correct me if I'm wrong, is it a 1% or a 2% mixture? It's very low. 70% is like extremely, like unheard of strong concentration for Roundup. But because of the way you're applying it, that's what people are doing to get a better kill. I think putting the fingers or brushes or whatever it might be on the roller would help that, and not have to concentrate your mix so hot, but it's kind of yet to be determined. But as I was looking at my back pasture the other day, I noticed that I have a patch. I should fly the drone up and show you guys. But there's a patch of ground out there with absolutely no smut grass, and there is a different type of grass that's growing out there, presumably choking out the smut grass or not letting it get established. Now, I don't want to just figure out what that grass is and plant that everywhere, because I don't know what the nutritive value is of that. But it got me thinking, well, what if you could outcompete the smut grass with something else? And then that got me thinking about an experiment that Evan on Country View Acres did on his property this summer, where he planted a sorghum Sudan mix that got like 5 or 6 feet tall. And I started thinking, well, what if I tried to plant something like that out here that could just like outcompete the smut grass? Supposedly the smut grass has a 2-year seed bank, so that we would likely have to do this for several years. But man, like if that could work, that would really be a lot better, I think. And I mean, I was kind of thinking about trying that, what Evan was doing, just because of the forage quantity that he got out of it. And then it kind of dawned on me, like, yeah, that stuff is going to get way taller than the smut grass, and it'll be kind of shaded out. I think I would still have to set aside maybe like 2 or 3 acres at a time, not let the cattle out there for at least a month to really allow that stuff to get established. But I think once it really takes off and gets up there, you know, man, we could graze it. We could simultaneously graze it and choke out the smut grass. So I kind of want to try that too. I'm not saying that I'm off of the weed wiper idea. I still think there's something to that as well. But yeah, if we could find something that would outcompete the smut grass, that would really be the way to go. And especially if it's like a desirable forage, like what that stuff is. So I don't know what that would look like though, if you let something get like 5 or 6 feet tall and then you turn the cattle out there to graze it. I mean, they're going to trample a lot of it, which I think a lot of people would argue is not necessarily a bad thing. You're going to put a lot of organic matter back into the soil and very likely improve the healthier soil, which is something that I want to start focusing on more as well. So it might just be a win-win all around. I'm not sure what the recovery time is on that stuff. I mean, we could play with it and figure it out. But I think that would be a fun experiment to try. It's too late to try to do it this year, but I mean, I could overseed that stuff in the springtime, maybe graze the cattle on it once and, you know, let them pick it down and then try to overseed that, you know. I don't know. It might be worth trying, at least on a small part of the pasture out there. And then if we get some good results, then that might be something that I want to do, you know, a little more widespread in the future. Need a drink, hold on. But I also got thinking about, you know, one idea leads you to another, and it would be cool if I do end up planting that sorghum Sudan, or it might be nice at least to have the option to cut and bale it. Because like a lot of guys around here will plant Sudan grass for hay. I think mixing the sorghum in, I'm not sure what the idea is of doing that, if it's higher protein, or I mean, it's got to be adding something or people wouldn't be doing it. If you know, let me know. But yeah, it would be cool to have the option, you know, to make hay out here, which is something that I've thought about and kind of wanted to do for a while. I think that might help clean up weeds as well, just because when cattle graze a pasture, they're selective. They only eat the things that they want. I've seen people say, and this is kind of something that I did try, if we strip graze them, you know, and give them a smaller size pasture, you kind of like force them to eat everything. Well, in my experience, what happened when I did that is that you can force them to eat everything. But by the time you get them around to eating that smut grass, they have grazed the desirable stuff like right down to the ground, and we don't want to do that either. So trying to graze more intensively, for me here, I didn't really like it, because I just thought that you do get them to eat the undesirable stuff, but it's at the cost of the desirables. And then you never can seem to get them to pick the smut grass right down to the ground like they do with the Dallas grass or the clover. So now you've created a situation where your desirable forage is overgrazed, your undesirable forage is grazed probably like how you would want it to be. So then when all the plants are trying to recover, the undesirable stuff has such an advantage because it hasn't been abused like the desirable stuff has. So I'm not saying there is no scenario where that works. It just didn't really seem to work here. And that's something that I kind of take issue with when you go around. Sorry, I just heard a buzzing next to me. I'm not sure what that is. But when you seek out grazing content on YouTube, especially, it seems like a lot of people are trying to sell you their method as that is the only way to do it. And I think, and I've harped on this before, grazing is such a region-specific thing. Like the way I do it here is going to be different than somebody 100 miles that way is doing it, which is different than, you know, somebody in the Midwest is doing it, and so on and so forth. We've got a different climate, we've got different species of grasses. So yeah, all of that is, you know, when you're watching content about grazing, just try to remember the person telling you that is telling you what works where they are at. And I'm not saying that there's not good information. There is, but you kind of got to see how it would apply to you in your environment, I guess would be my, if I had a message to give you about grazing, you know. And, you know, after being on YouTube, I do, you know, have made friends like across the country through the YouTube channel, and have talked to them about like how they graze. And some of the things are applicable everywhere. Some things are region specific. So you just, yeah. So I see in the chat there, no one irrigates pasture where I'm at. And that's probably true. I'd say in most of the country, people don't irrigate pasture. That, I know people have left me comments in disbelief that we do this. But so yeah, just there's a case in point right there. You know, irrigated pasture is fairly common where I'm at. And if you, like I say, go 100 miles that way, people wouldn't even dream of doing that. So yeah, and then that gets me thinking too, that just because Evan was successful with his sorghum Sudan experiment, that doesn't necessarily mean that I will be. But I feel like in the summer growing season, our main difference is my days are probably a little bit hotter on average than they are in Illinois, I think is where he's at, close to Indiana. But then also he's relying on rain to irrigate that stuff, and I can make it rain anytime I want out here. I just got to be able to pay for it. So anyway. Oh yes, the Haycore sampler. You know, that I talked about in the last video how I'm a habitual project starter and not a project finisher. That's one that only got so far, and it's almost done. I mean, I just need to get a little shank on it that'll fit in the drill, and then cut a hole in that pipe so that the hay sample has somewhere to come out of. So you know, I'm gonna have to do that soon. Because I would like to sample this hay. It's getting late in the season now. If I'm going to try to buy a couple blocks of alfalfa, I better get on it. So it would be nice to know what I've got here. But yeah, the Haycore sampler hasn't done anything other than what you saw several videos back. So I see any plans to work on the tractor. I think you're probably referring to the Jubilee. And yeah, I was thinking about that as I was laying in bed the other night. Um, I got that thing all tore apart, and what was it? It was pistons and rings that were on back order, and it kind of took the wind out of my sails on that project. I think I could probably find them now. So yeah, I still need to order the parts, and I feel like I've given you that excuse the last 100 times someone has asked me about that project. Hey, get out of here. So yeah, I plan to finish it. I do, but I don't know when it's gonna be. It's one of those things that it's not like I'm waiting to get that tractor up and running so I can do a certain job with it. It's more like I will find stuff to do with it, but it's yeah, it the biggest thing now is it's taken up so much room in the shop that I feel like a couple days I've just thought, you know what, I'm just gonna put it back together without even painting it and just to get it out of here. But I feel like I've come this far. I can't do that now. I really would like to get that thing painted up and looking good. I've got fairly new tires here on the 8N that I would probably, and if I haven't, I'm sure I've told you guys before, but you never know. Could be new people watching here. A lot of the parts on the 8N are interchangeable with the parts on the Jubilee. So my thought was to like take the best of the 8N parts, and I'm pointing over there because I'm sitting right next to the 8N. That tractor's got good tires on it, good wheels. What else does it have? That's probably the best things about it. And the loader. The loader will also fit on the Jubilee. In fact, the loader was made for an NAA, which is what a Jubilee is. So we'd probably do the best rebuild that I can do on what I've got there, and then take the best pieces of the 8N, namely the wheels and tires and the loader, put those on the Jubilee, and then the 8N would be just like a good sort of all around. The PTO does work on it. The 3-point hitch does work on it, but honestly, what I mainly see doing with that would be like pulling around the manure spreader or any sort of small trailers, stuff like that, you know, where I don't want to move them around with my pickup. And a lot of times it's not that I don't want to move them with my pickup, it's that, you know, my truck's a 4-door long bed. It doesn't fit a lot of places that a little 8N would. So, I mean, that long term, that's the plan. And then I think, well, shoot, Tyler, if you're gonna do that, you're gonna have to paint that loader too. You can't take an old nasty looking loader and put it on a freshly painted tractor. So like so many things, one job turns into two, turns into three. But first, before we get that far, yeah, we need to get that thing running again. And I think that's just going to be a matter of putting it back together. So yeah, that's what's going on with that. It's coming. I don't know when it's going to be. I keep thinking, yeah, winter, it's a good winter project, but a lot of what I have to do on that is painting. And you know, when it's cold, that's not really the ideal time to paint. I should be painting that stuff like now would be a great time. But what I might end up doing if I really get serious about it, which I should, is just making like a little paint booth with tarps and PVC pipe. It wouldn't be that hard to do, and then put like a space heater in there and, you know, see if I could just raise the temperature within the paint booth enough just to get that stuff painted. But where it's at now, I need probably just new rings, but if I'm gonna do that, I may as well get new pistons. I've got new rod bearings that need to go on. So we need to put like the top end of the motor back together, get the oil pan back on it. I haven't decided how far I wanna go with the head. I do have new valves, and I might try to do a valve job on it. I don't think it honestly needs it. So I might just hold off on that. Just get the head put back on. I should probably get the head resurfaced, but again, I don't know if it really needs it. But once I can get the engine put back together, basically I need to get like the body buttoned back up, and not the body panels, but I mean, I've got a cover off the bottom. I've got one of the axle tubes off. Just get everything that's going to be red put back on the tractor, and then I could at least just get that painted, and then the rest of it is sheet metal, which, you know, would be a little bit easier, I guess, to paint. So that's where we're at with that. There's a lot of work to be done there. And I don't know how you guys operate, but the way I operate, and whether this is right or wrong or what, I don't know, but I get excited about a certain thing that I'm doing, and then I kind of focus all my effort onto that. And then if my enthusiasm runs out before the project is done, I'll usually start a different one. And I'm trying to get better about that. That's what's good about like the Corel projects, is I don't have that option, because once I get the Corel tore down, I need to get it put back up, because I'm gonna need it. So, but when I kind of do like the tractor projects are kind of like, they're almost like hobby projects more than, you know, business projects, right? So, but yeah, you know, that tractor would look really cool, pulling that manure spreader or bale unroller once it is finished. So we'll get there. And then I did see in the chat somebody talking about the side-by-side, the Honda. Again, towed that thing back to my house and parked it, and it has not moved. So I've been relying a lot on the four-wheeler. And where I really miss that Honda is when I'm doing welding projects, because the bed on that thing's big enough. I can sit the welder in the back and still have enough room for like the portaband cables and pretty much all the tools that I need to do like pretty big projects. I can fit it all in that side-by-side, which is cool. But I need to get that thing in the shop. There's actually enough room for it right behind the Jubilee. And that's where I probably need to pull it in there. And I almost ordered parts for that. But then I thought, well, you better tear it apart first and make sure you know what it needs. Because I feel like I know what it needs, but, you know, you may not know exactly until you get it tore apart and actually look in there. I feel like, I mean, that Honda side-by-side has over, I think it has 11,000 miles on it. So for perspective, I know like for your car, 11,000 miles is nothing. But for a side-by-side or a four-wheeler, that'd be the equivalent of like 600,000 miles on your car. Like that's a lot of hours and miles for a machine like that. You know, like reading through side-by-side forums, these guys with like high performance side-by-sides, they're happy if they can get 2,000 miles on their machine without a major breakdown. So just because that thing is sitting at my shop broken, I still think it's a really awesome machine. And I was actually leaning towards replacing or rebuilding the top end on that engine anyway, just because it does have so many miles on it. And now I think it broke a piston ring, just judging by the noise and the way it's acting. It's not seized up or anything like that. And if it broke a piston ring, it very likely scored the cylinder wall. And even if it didn't, the cylinder has probably got wear. I guess that particular engine is known for what they call shadowing. And what that is like the bore is not straight, or it wears kind of unevenly, I guess. And that engine was starting to burn some oil before the major breakdown happened, and I assume that was probably what it was from. So I think to fix it, I just need a new piston rings and a new cylinder, and it'll probably run like that. But I do want to take it apart just to see, because there is a chance that there's like some catastrophic failure in there that's not going to be worth fixing. I doubt that, but I don't want to go spend, you know, $800 on parts, pull the engine apart, and then realize it's not worth saving. So We need to do a little exploratory mechanicking on the Honda, but I do miss it, you know. I mean, and I have the Yamaha side by side, which we bought that years and years ago. That was our fun side by side that we would like take camping and stuff. And it's geared more for that. The bed is smaller, and those sorts of things. It doesn't have as nice of a trailer hitch like the Honda has. So, I mean, it'll work. And I know, like, oh, poor me. I got these two side by sides and one of them's broken down. But yeah, the Honda is definitely much better suited for the ranch environment where I mostly need it. So, any other questions? I think I've kind of run out of things that I wanted to talk about. Why can't I not see the chat here? There it is. So yeah, if you guys have questions, throw them out there. I know some people get frustrated with me because I don't read the chat while I'm talking. This fly. But I have learned that if I try to read the chat while I'm talking, I can't really read it good and I can't really talk good. So so that's where we're at. All right, when am I starting the bale unroller? I promised myself I wouldn't start a new project until I finish that pig feeder. So I think probably the next video I'll at least work on the pig feeder. It's close to done as far as like just the building portion of it. I do still want to clean it up and paint it. So that might take, you know, that'll add to the time before you actually see it in use. But I think we're kind of just down to, I need to put a lid on the hopper, which I've pretty well figured out how I want to do that. And then I need to put lids on the trough parts that will keep rodents out. And I'm hoping we'll keep some water out, like if it rains. I mean, in a perfect world, and there probably is a way that I could do it if I think about it enough, but if that feeder was waterproof, then it would be like even better. And I actually, just as I'm talking about that, I thought about how I could probably do that. The lids where the pigs are gonna like push them up with their nose to get their heads in to eat, if I put like a lip around that, and then the lid, instead of just being a flat piece of steel, it would have to have like a rolled edge all around, so that when it shut on that lip, if any water, like rainwater, came down on it, think of it like flashing on your house, I guess. The water would like roll off of the lid, and it can't like magically go back up and then into the feed area. So that'll add a little bit of complication, I guess, to the build, but I think well worth it, because if that feeder leaks and it can't get rained on, then it's not really that great, because it kind of defeats the purpose of an automatic feeder, right? Because you can't fill it up enough for the pigs to just free feed out of it, because when the feed gets wet, it gets caked in there and then it won't flow. So yeah, you would have to like keep that under cover in order for it to remain an automatic feeder. So yeah, see there, we just figured something out here. I'm gonna have to do some sort of lip and a rolled edge on the lids to keep it dry. But yeah, I want to get that done because I can use that immediately. As soon as it's finished, I can go plop it down in the pig pen and start using it right away. And now thinking about that, another thing that I need to do is go and get bulk feed. I know in years past, I would get wheat right out of the field. This year, that just wasn't an option. The guy that I usually buy it from didn't grow wheat, so I couldn't do it. And then in years past, I've gotten rice too, and that works good. But I guess there's an outfit, it's like a couple hours away, so it's not real convenient. But the guy will like custom mix you feed in a tote bag. So as I understand it, he grows the grain himself and mixes it and bags it, and you can pick up like the super sacks. So I think I want to end up doing that. But there again, I would like to have this free feeder done before I get all that stuff, because when I need to fill it up, it'll be nice to have that bulk supply. So yeah, a platform for the feeder. So this is another thing that I've been thinking about a lot. I don't want the feeder just on the ground. Eventually in the mud is what that will be. So a couple of things that I'm thinking about doing, and the first one originally that I had thought was pouring a slab for the feeder so that the feeder would stay on concrete, and then also elevating the feeder like a couple inches off the ground with oil pipe skids. That way the feeder is not just sitting on wet concrete and rotting the bottom out, and you can clean underneath it fairly easily. You can just pick it up and clean underneath it. Eventually, that's probably what I'll do. I won't be pouring a slab this year though. So this year it is probably going to end up getting pushed down into the mud. And something I thought about and a lot of people suggested was putting bed liner on the bottom of it. And I think I probably will do that. I got to figure out what kind of bed liner I want to use, because in my experience, the stuff that you apply yourself is not all that great as far as, like stuff that you get professionally applied, like in the bed of a truck. That stuff lasts forever. It's awesome. And maybe it would be worth it to just take the pig feeder to like a Line-X place and just ask them, what would it take to Line-X the pig feeder, at least on the bottom? And it might be worth it. I don't know what does it cost for them to do a truck bed. I haven't done one in years. I'm sure it's more expensive than it was when I had it done. All right, what else we got here? When's the pig feeder finished? Well, I don't know, not yet. That's the best answer I've got for that question. Have I thought about building a round bale trailer? I have actually, and I don't think I ever will do that, just because I only move round bales, one time of the year. So it doesn't really, to me anyway, it doesn't justify building a dedicated trailer for that. What I have thought about doing, and I think I will do this before next year, is my trailer that I have. I call that a car hauler. I don't know if everybody calls it that, but there's like two kinds of trailers. You got a deck over, where the trailer deck is flat the whole way, and then a car hauler where the trailer deck sits kind of below the tops of the tires, and then you have raised fenders. So originally I had thought about converting my trailer to a deck over, because the bales would haul a lot more nicely on that. But I decided against that, just because a deck over trailer is much taller. So like for certain things, that's not as convenient. And driving equipment up on there would be one of those things, because your ramps would be super steep. So I decided I didn't want to make it a deck over. Then I started putting that pallet in between the trailer fenders, and that actually works pretty good. You can get the same amount of bales on the trailer as you could if it was a deck over. But the problem that I do have with that is when you're running empty, the pallet moves around and it's never seems like it is in the right spot. You got to always move it back where it was. So what I thought about doing, because the fenders on that trailer are in pretty rough shape, they have cracked and bent and broken. So I thought what I should do is remove those fenders completely. They're made out of probably 16 gauge metal, which is about a 1/16 of an inch, which is, pretty thin. So we get that off of there, and then I could build I could build fenders on that trailer out of heavier steel, maybe like 10 gauge sheet, and then put like some square tube reinforcement on there to make the fenders super strong. Not necessarily drive over fenders, but maybe, but strong enough to carry some load. And then I could make a rack that like falls in and kind of like lays on the fenders for carrying round bales. So in a sense, you would have a round bale trailer, because that rack, I could design it like especially for that. And then when I'm not hauling round bales, I could just pull it off and just use it like a normal trailer. So I think that would be easy and worth the effort, especially since the fenders are already shot. So it's not like I'm cutting off good fenders to do this. It's a maintenance project that needs to happen one way or another. In fact, a couple times this year when I was hauling round bales, the fenders are so bent and the load was so heavy that, you know, when you load the trailer up, it squats just a little bit under the weight, and that fender was actually rubbing on the tire, and it wasn't rubbing like real bad, so it's not a huge deal. But what can happen is as it's rubbing while you're going down the road, that creates heat, dry hay, you know, just sounds like a bad idea. Hey, fly, get out of here. So a dedicated trailer, no, but modifying the trailer that I use a little bit more to make it work better, yes, that's in the cards. And then while we're talking about that, I still do plan to get the Dodge like up and running, hopefully for next year. Maybe enough just to like do the rice straw bales. We'll kind of see on that. And it doesn't really need that much work. It's more like everything. It's money, right? It's hard for me to want to spend the money to like reupholster the seat and make it just a little bit nicer for me to drive in. But I feel like that, you know, I got to do it. So I'll end up doing it, but I'm just not sure when it's going to happen. So yeah, I did order a bunch of engine parts, you know, and just stuff to like change the oil, fuel filters, like, you know, all those type of things. And it runs good how it is. So it might need an electric fan though. I did notice when I was moving rice straw bales with it that it would start to kind of idle funny, and I felt like it was getting hot. I'm not actually sure if the temperature gauge works, so I might have to put like, that actually might be a cool thing to build, like a little auxiliary gauge cluster to put on the dash. If I could get my my TIG welding real dialed in, like make it out of aluminum, it might look kind of cool. What's up with the Dodge? There you go. I answered it before you even asked. So, and actually, in full disclosure, I have wanted to work on the Dodge here these last couple months, but over the summer, the wasps have moved into that truck like you wouldn't believe, and I'm afraid to open the door because I see them flying into the door seams. I know they got a big old nest right there in the hinge, so I'm gonna have to wait one of these mornings when it's cold. I gotta go open all the doors and spray them. Those darn things. I mean, they just get into everything. I cannot express how I feel about wasps strongly enough to you guys. Let's see. How often do I get down to Modesto or Turlock? Never go there. Okay, $500 for I'm guessing you're talking about line Xing, I'm guessing. That's actually not as bad as I thought. I thought it would be closer to 1,000. "10-inch channel for the fenders." Now those would be drive over fenders for sure. The fly spray for the cows. Somebody asked how much soap do I put in there? I've been just putting a gallon of soap in to the 25-gallon tank and then filling it up with water. If the flies are real bad, sometimes I'll put permethrin in there as well, but what from what I see, the soap on the cow sprayer at least seems to work just as good. The permethrin is better like in a back rubber, or like if I'm hand spraying them, then I like to put the permethrin in. But for the cow sprayer where they're just getting multiple applications all day long, the dish soap, I mean, honestly, actually, that is one thing I did film yesterday that I will probably still put into the next video. I was moving the cow sprayer to the other gateway where the cows were walking through, and the amount of dead flies on the ground was pretty impressive. And that was with a straight soap mix, so I know that works. The problem with the soap is there is no residual effect from it, meaning if the cow gets sprayed with soap water, that spray is only killing the flies that it hits. Whereas if you have a permethrin mix, then now the cow's covered in permethrin, right? So if a fly comes and lands on her a couple hours later, it's gonna die as well. But like I said, I'm kind of repeating myself here, when they're getting several applications from the sprayer a day, the soap is killing enough on contact that it makes a pretty noticeable difference. So I've had people tell me that you could get away with far less soap. I think, I'm trying to think what the number was. I was told it was like an ounce per gallon, or maybe a little bit more than that, but still, that would be 25 ounces. Let's just say 32 ounces or a quart per 25 is all that some people do. To me, it's soap. I don't feel like putting an extra amount on is a big deal. And that stuff is cheap enough. We just get it at Costco. It's like $7 for a gallon. So it's not that bad. I'll just get like 4 or 5 gallons at a time. And in fact, if I could find it in a 55-gallon drum, I would probably buy it, because not only does it work in the cow sprayer, but it works good for spraying wasp nests too. So yeah, I feel like with the soap, I don't mind mixing that a little bit hot, because I'm not worried about like with permethrin, for example, like, you know, overdoing it. I mean, it's got like a label, they tell you how to mix it. I just feel like you probably should follow that, you know, because at the end of the day, you don't wash your dishes with permethrin, but you do wash them with dish soap. So let's see. Wow, Pewview Farms. Have not heard from you in a while. What's up for winter projects is what Ted's asking me. You know, I don't really know offhand. I haven't got that far. I'd say the Jubilee is on that list, because that's a good thing to do when the weather is bad. But I seem like I always say I'm going to do that this winter, and then I never have time. So we're going to have to get the cows moved to the winter pasture here before we know it. And then I was also thinking about, so here's one. I just thought of one. At the steer pasture, I've got, what do I have up there? 8 steers that are going to stay there through the winter, I've decided. Just because when I bring them back here, I just don't really have a good place to house them. In years past, I would put them with the weaned calves, but what happens is, you know, when you're trying to feed 2 animals of such different size, you can imagine that the smaller calves get bullied out, and the steers kind of, you know, I won't say they overeat, because for what we're doing with them, you can't really get them to overeat, but they're robbing from the calves, you know, so we got to consider them as well. Keeping them up there just seemed to work better, especially since that's on hill ground. The mud's not really an issue, you know, because the water drains off of it, and just keeping them up there for the winter time is good. I was happy with doing that. Excuse me one sec. I'm just not used to talking this much. So, if I'm going to keep 8 of them up there, I think last winter I kept 5 up there. And for 5, I could do 1 bale every like 3 days in a ring feeder, and that seemed to work. So if I'm going to have 8 of them up there, I don't think necessarily that I want to do it that way, just because it's a lot of trips. I'd have to do a bale probably every other day, which means I have to drive up there every other day. And the steer pasture, it takes me 30 minutes to get there. I think it's 20 miles or so. And one time on one of my many trips to or from, I added up like how many times a week I go, how much the fuel, I like figured it all out, what it costs to do that. And it wasn't a huge expense, but it was an expense. So if I can reduce that, that's better, right? So what I think I want to do is get a second feeder up there. And I know a lot of people will say, well, take the feed wagon because that's bigger. You could fit several bales in there. And I thought about it, but like I just got done telling you, that's like 20 miles. I don't know that the feed wagon is really roadworthy for that distance. Plus, we got to go right through downtown Lincoln. I don't have brake lights or anything on that. I could put the triangle on it, but it doesn't really feel smart because I can get to Lincoln on mostly back roads, right? And then once I get through Lincoln would probably be all right. But then the highway that I've got to take to get up to where the steers are at, there's no shoulder. And this may come as a shock, but people drive 90 miles an hour down there, and it just seems dangerous. There's a lot of reasons why I don't want to take the feed wagon up there. Not to mention the fact that I'll be using it at the winter pasture. So I kind of need it here for that reason. I don't want to roll bales out on the ground at the winter pasture. I might end up doing that. I guess it wouldn't be the worst, but the nice thing about feeding them in the feed wagon is that you can kind of meter it out and make a bale last 2 days, which is what I want it to last up there. If I roll it out on the ground, I feel like they're just going to eat it all the first day, and then they'll be hungry the next day. I don't know. I guess if they overeat one day, then they can go without the next. Anyway, what I'm leaning towards more at the steer pasture is just getting a second ring feeder of some type. So I've still got a third of that Lakeland ring feeder. So I thought about just making 2 more thirds that could pin up to that one. But I don't know if I'm going to do that, I may as well just build the whole thing is kind of where I'm at with it. I have been talking to AeroQuip a little bit about getting one of their feeders, but I'm not sure if that's going to end up happening or not. And if it did happen, it probably wouldn't be in time for this year anyway. So I'm going to have to figure out something for this winter if I don't want to be driving up there every other day, which I do not. So that's part of it. And then the other part is I've talked to the landowners, and it sounds like they're okay with me doing this, but I probably want to stage several bales up there, and they're nice enough to let me use their tractor. So if I had, let's say like 10 or 20 bales sitting up there, then I at least wouldn't have to drive my truck every time I go. I could drive the car, or like if I'm already in town with the family, we could just swing by over there, and I could kind of feed those guys when it was convenient instead of having to make a special trip up there every time that I had to do it. So wow, this is a really long-winded answer. Winter projects is some type of a feeder, another feeder to put up there. I might end up just buying one. Man, you can get one of the cheaper ones for like $500. I don't even think I can build one for that, honestly. I don't know how long the cheap ones would last. but I see a lot of people have them and use them, and they seem to work. So I don't know. It's it's one of those things. It's what would be cool though. Actually, now you kind of got me thinking about this. Is what I have figured out with feeding round bales in a feeder. The conventional wisdom says they waste a ton of hay when you do that. And if you have done that, you probably know that that's right. And I think what the big problem is that people are taking 6-foot diameter bales and they're dropping them into an 8-foot diameter feeder. So what does that mean? That means that if you get that bale perfectly centered in the ring feeder, there is 1 foot, about this much, of gap all the way around. Well, 1 foot is not enough room for the cow to reach in and eat with her head in that feeder. So what is she gonna do? She's gonna reach in, take a big old bite, pull it out of the feeder, chew on it, drop probably half of it on the ground, and that's why round bales have this reputation of, oh, you waste so much. Well, you waste so much because the feeders, here's a hot take, the feeders are not designed well. I think feeding the 4-foot bales in the 8-foot feeders seems to work really well, and they waste barely anything because now you've got a 2-foot gap, which is plenty of room for them to hold their head in that feeder. And then they're not so prone to pulling the hay out and dropping it on the ground. So maybe it would be cool to build a 10-foot feeder. So you could drop a 6-foot round bale in the middle of it. They would have 2 feet all the way around. And I think the reason that they don't do this now is because then you would have a big pile of hay in the middle that the cows don't eat, or because they can't reach it, right? Well, I think the way you get around that is that actually it's a problem that solves itself, because what happens is the cows start pushing on those feeders, and because at least I don't stake mine into the ground so they can move them around, and that's exactly what they'll do. If you had an 8-foot feeder and they couldn't reach hay that was in the middle of that, they're just going to be pushing on that feeder and sliding it on the ground until they can reach that hay that's in the middle. So yeah, I don't know. I can't be the first one to think of this. So maybe there's a reason that they don't do it like that anyway. But yeah. So what I could do, because I have that tubing roller, and it wouldn't be fun, but I could roll out some 10-foot diameter circles and make one specifically to how I want it. Or I could just make another 8-foot feeder and know that I'm only going to be taking 4-foot bales down there, which is probably what I'll take anyway. So that's probably what I'll end up doing. But yeah, so I've been kind of planning a trip to the steel yard because I have all these projects on the horizon. So what do we got now? We've got some type of bale unroller, maybe both types. We've got another ring feeder, fenders for the trailer, and some sort of like drop-in bracket that would hold round bales. And then I think the one that I have not yet mentioned is I want to make a transfer tank to go in the back of my truck. And if you don't know what that is, it's a fuel tank that just fits in your bed. So then I could go fill it up with diesel, and it would just be a lot more convenient for like filling up tractors, because the way that I do that now is I take my 5-gallon jugs to the fuel station and fill them up there. And I've only got 3 of them, so realistically I can only store like 15 gallons of fuel. And with the tractor that goes pretty quickly. Or gas, like the 8N runs on gas, so I got to keep one of those, at least one for gas. And it just doesn't really work that well. It'd be much better to have like a 40 to 50 gallon transfer tank in my truck that I could just fill up and have it on a pump. Then if I'm working in the hayfield, working here, working wherever, I've just always got some fuel as long as the tank's full. So several projects, and then maybe get the steel for the weed wiper as well. So yeah, I'm gonna have to start designing a lot of these things and figuring out exactly what I need to buy to build them, and get some prices and see what things look like, what we can actually do. So yeah, a lot of those could probably fall into the category of winter projects. The feeder is going to have to happen first, though, because I will either need a second feeder up there, or I'm going to need to bring like 4 or 5 of those guys back home, and I don't want to do that. So another thing, I don't know. I thought about bringing steers like to the winter pasture and keeping them there. But the thing about the winter pasture, the best thing about it is it's a nice place for them to have calves. So to me, it makes more sense to take bred females there. And, so that's kind of what we do. I'm just chuckling at that comment I saw about, do you sleep? Well, I do sleep. But I'd be lying if I didn't tell you that when I lay down at night, I do think about a lot of this stuff. Sometimes it does keep me up for a while, but sometimes it's a nice way to fall asleep. I've actually figured out a lot of design issues while I'm laying in bed trying to go to sleep. So, what was... So yeah, above ground tanks. We actually I have 2 of those, but the problem here, it's unfortunate, but when you fill those up, people just cut the locks and steal your fuel. So I guess they could do the same thing with a transfer tank, but it's a little bit more hidden, I guess, than the stationary tanks. So yeah, it's a sad state, that I have 2 really nice tanks. They're 3 or 350 gallons. We used to keep gas in one and diesel in the other, and then it just felt like we're just donating it to the thieves because they just come and cut the locks. And it got to the point where my grandpa just quit locking the tanks altogether. He says, well, I'm just spending a fortune on locks. They just cut them. So what's the point? A guy I used to work with, his favorite saying was, a lock just keeps an honest person out, which it's very true when you think about it. Locks are very easy to defeat, especially with like cordless tools that people have now. You can cut through a lock so easily. So yeah, I just kind of gave up on that because it's nice having the bulk storage, but if people are just going to come and steal it, then that's stupid. So I don't do it anymore. Yeah, I don't know. If there was like a way to hide the tanks, but still, yeah, it's probably just not, and even red diesel, people steal that. So like, I always kind of thought, well, I get people why they want to steal gas, but you just don't usually think of thieves as like driving diesel trucks, but I guess they do. And yeah, people steal diesel. We used to, years and years ago when I worked for the farmer, we would not always, but it would happen that people would like come siphon diesel out of the tractors when you left them parked out in the field. So yeah, it's unfortunate, but that's where things have come to, at least in this area. Hopefully it's not like that where you are, but I kind of get the feeling it's like that in a lot of places now, especially it's this is like, could go for a whole video on this topic almost, but when you live somewhat close to an urban area, these are issues that you deal with. And I've also often thought, like, man, I wish I could just get out to so far away that no one would ever drive by my place or know where we were at or anything. But the problem with that is you get so far away from a populace, then it becomes really hard to like direct sell your products, right? Because that's, as a small farmer, small rancher, we kind of depend on that direct sale model. That's really the only way we can make it work at our size. So you're kind of, as the saying goes, I'll change it a little bit in case kids are watching, but you're danged if you do and danged if you don't. So that's where we're at. So I'll answer this question because I get asked this, even though I've answered it before, but I still get asked all the time, like how things are laid out. Because unlike, a typical larger operation where you're all just in one spot, we're kind of spread out in multiple places. And again, that just goes back to being a small guy. We don't have the huge home base that some people have. And when you're renting properties, you kind of take what you can get where they are available. So like the home base here where I'm sitting is family owned. And then where we live, my house and shop is family owned. But the winter pasture, the steer pasture, and the hay fields are all rented ground. I think that's everything. So I'm fortunate in that my house is within, like I can see the barn here from my house. I think it's only a half mile away. It's pretty close. And then the winter pasture and the hay fields are both pretty close to each other actually. And they are only, 3 or 4 miles away from the ranch here. So not too far at all. And then the steer pasture is by far the furthest away, and it's like 20 miles, 30 minutes, whatever that is, to the east of us here. So it's quite a bit further away, but and I was hesitant actually to even rent that piece just because it is far away, so it's not convenient to go out there all the time. But I did it because for someone in my situation, finding pasture to rent is very difficult, especially in this area, because we're in a valley and it's mostly flat, so much of this land is farmed. Most people don't make pasture out of it. It's going to be rice, it's going to be an orchard, either walnuts or almonds are big in this area, or it's going to be hay of some type. So there's not a lot of pasture. And when there is, if somebody doesn't want to do cattle anymore and they rent it out to somebody else, usually that person that rents it is going to plant trees there, plant rice or whatever it might be. So being able to find pasture to rent is very difficult in this area. And if you're not willing to travel at least a little bit, you're almost just not going to find it. So I'm fortunate that we were able to get that, is the way that I think about it. Is it a perfect rental property? No, it's not, but almost none of them are. So we do have to deal with some things there that we don't deal with at the other ones, but then there are bonuses there that we don't get at the other ones. So it all balances out, and fortunately the property owners are in and out of there all the time. So if there's a problem, they can usually alert me to it, which there hasn't been many, knock on wood. So yeah, that's where everything's laid out. The majority of it is pretty close and convenient, but not the steer pasture. The steer pasture is far. So yeah, or they're building houses on it. We haven't encountered that too much yet, but it's, I'm sure, coming. Just like everywhere. Let's see. I'm looking for... Yeah, that's a good point. Greg. I think he's referring to about getting out in the middle of nowhere, and it's like, that's cool and all, but then you got to think about services. Like he mentioned schools. Well, we homeschool our kids, so that's actually not an issue, but you got to think about like being able to run to town to get parts, being able to run to town to get supplies. You know, I guess if you, which I mostly do that now. I kind of try to consolidate those trips so that when I do make a trip to town, I'm going, you know, I don't like that because you spend so much money, but you just get it all out of the way on the same day, I guess. So yeah, I don't know. Tillable land around here, you wouldn't believe me if I told you, I bet. If it is suitable to plant trees, which pretty much, that used to mean something, now it doesn't mean as much. Now it means, is it flat, basically. And yeah, if you can plant trees on it, you're looking at $25,000 to $30,000 an acre. So yeah, pretty tough to buy ground too. I mean, we always kind of joke, we could buy ground, we could try to buy ground, but we'd never pay it off. Maybe our grandkids would get to see it get paid off, you know. And the thing of that too, you know, again, we're getting near a rabbit hole here. You buy that ground, I mean, you can't hardly pay for it with cattle or hay. I mean, you'd be lucky if you could even just break even on the mortgage. And so it's like you're gonna go buy some acreage and farm it just to break even on the payment. Like, it doesn't make sense. Now, if you get out of this area, out of the valley into the hill ground, then it goes down. Or if you get up into like the far north state, I've seen land up there going for as little as like 1,000 an acre. But same token, like, you can't do much with it. There's no water up there. It's not, you can't really farm it. You need thousands of acres to make it worthwhile to graze it. It's more like a high desert kind of environment up there. So, you know, there's a reason it's that expensive, I guess, is because you can pretty much grow whatever you want. We have, you know, a long enough growing season here and all that, and the ground is good enough to do it. But yeah, it's gotten crazy, and this is just like within my lifetime. I remember, in fact, my dad and I were just talking about this morning. When I was a kid, you know, just like good river ground around here, you could get for like 2,000 to 3,000 an acre, and of course, people thought that was outrageous then. Now, man, what you wouldn't do to just pay that much for it. Yeah, it's expensive. I remember several years ago, I went on a pheasant hunting trip in South Dakota, and we got to talking about land prices, you know, and I think up there they were looking at like 3,000 to 4,000 an acre. I want to say, I don't quote me on that. This was a while ago, so I'm sure it's different now anyway. But yeah, they just absolutely couldn't believe that anyone would pay that much for ground, you know. And yeah, that's where it's at. I guess I had heard a while ago that in the Midwest, like good farmable ground in the Midwest was getting really up there too. But that was like, I don't know. Do any of you guys know what, like, if you were to go to Nebraska and get good flat corn ground, what would that go for now? Because I think a while back I remember hearing it was like 10 or 11,000 an acre. So I'm guessing it's probably still that or more now. I don't know. But it sure makes it difficult for, you know, a young person to get started. I mean, you almost have to just know that you're going to be renting ground, you know, which is what we do. You know, and honestly, with good landlords, that's not that big of a deal, which I'm very fortunate. All of my landlords are really good to work with, so I don't have any complaints in that department, which is nice. I guess if they were that bad, I can move on, right? Let's see here. I'm just kind of reading through these. Sorry, I know me just sitting here quietly doesn't make a very good live stream, but yeah. Oh, I did see someone ask about the barn cat. I've still only seen the one. I actually haven't checked the trail camera here in a while, but I'm guessing by the amount of food consumption that we still just have that black cat with the bushy tail. But I feel like it's probably a female, you know, because I just feel like I've seen this happen like every year. Is in the summertime, the barn cats kind of vacate because most of the hay is gone, which means most of the rodents are gone. And then this time of year, you start bringing the hay back, and then the cats just show up. I don't know where they come from, but they show up. And I was hoping last year that if we just kept feeding them, they would stay. And I can't believe that they didn't. But maybe one year we'll get one to just hang around. Just so we know, like last winter, do you guys remember? Now I've forgotten. I think there were like 5 cats living in this barn. I want to say it was at least 5. There might have been more even. And I didn't hardly ever see a mouse in here or sign of a mouse living in here. So I'm kind of thinking like, if I don't start seeing some more cats showing up on that trail cam, I'm gonna have to go like to an animal shelter or something. I feel like they have cats that they will just give away as barn cats just because they need something to do with them. So I might have to look into that because I want at least 5 in here for the winter. I've decided that seems like a pretty good number. They've got good shelter and cover here. If you keep feeding them, they do seem to stay through the winter. And I know there was one, it was like, I don't even know what you call it. It wasn't tiger striped. It had almost like diamonds on it. It's kind of interesting looking coat on it. But it had a couple kittens back there. And when I knew kind of where they were living. They were living between the back wall and the back bale. And when I pulled those last bales out, there were like remnants of rodents and stuff like that. Mama cat was doing a good job. She was earning her keep. And I did catch her at the feeder, so she got a little bit of reward too. But we had those 2 kind of younger kittens living in the wing here. I think they ate most of the food, and I'm sure they caught mice too. You know, people have often told me don't feed them because if they're full, they won't catch mice, and I just don't agree with that at all. A cat will catch a mouse just for the fun of it, even if they're not hungry. So that's we feed them to keep them around because, you know, like I say, I just would have bet anything those cats would have stayed here through the summer if we kept feeding them. But I don't know, something was calling to them, whatever it was. So I've been seeing this question popping up too about, are we going to get a new puppy? Certainly not anytime soon. I will tell you that. It's not like I'll never get another dog, but you know, I still got a bad feeling about how all that happened. And I'm certainly not going to go out looking for one. Now, if something happened where, you know, like the same way we got Belly, like if somebody found a puppy and it needed a home, then I could probably be talked into it if, you know. But yeah, as far as that, I'm not looking for one. So we'll put it that way. Do we get hard frost or under 32 degrees? Yeah. So Becky is asking about our winter, our climate in the winter time, and like, do we freeze here? Well, yeah, but I think my definition of a freeze is probably not the same as someone in North Dakota. So we'll get, I think the lowest temperature I've seen here was probably in the teens, like the high teens, low 20s, something like that. So at that temperature, like puddles will freeze over. I think the most ice I've seen in a water trough was a 1/2 inch thick. And bear in mind, this isn't something that happens often. This is just like a once, I can remember that happening one time. I've seen puddles freeze over several times, but seeing a 1/2 inch of ice, that's only happened once. So the thing of it is, though, is when we get, like, say we get a 20-degree morning, it'll still warm up to probably like 40 degrees that day. So when we get a freeze, a California freeze, it's not going to last for more than a few hours. I have had pipes break from it before that weren't wrapped. But usually what my grandpa would do and what I've taken to doing is you just get a faucet going on a drip, and that keeps the water moving so it doesn't freeze. And if you can prepare for a cold morning and do that, then you usually don't have any problems. But like the frost-free hydrants that I see a lot of people using, I wouldn't even know where to buy one of those. I would have to order it. They're not available in this area. Now, if you go to the mountains east of us, and even to the mountains west of us as well, they get snow up there. But it's much higher elevation. I think we're sitting at like 300 feet here above sea level, so we're not very high. But like Donner Pass to the east of us, I think is like close to 8,000 feet. So they get pretty cold up there and get snow up there. But down here where we're at, it's pretty mild, honestly. I mean, I think somebody that lives in like Wisconsin or North Dakota would probably think that our winters are t-shirt weather all winter long. So we'll put it that way, I guess. Not a white Christmas down here, that's for sure. Let's see. Any plans of getting more animals? Not really, honestly. I can't think of it. Oh, actually, there is. Yes, we've got some coming, as a matter of fact. I don't think I've mentioned this yet. Just because it's, yeah, not something I love talking about. But the other night when the incident with Belly happened, if you saw that video, you know I was here packaging chicken. And after that happened and everything that followed it, I guess I was, I had a bunch of chicken out on the table, so I was putting it in the freezer before I was going to head home. And I guess when I was putting it in there, I didn't get the door shut all the way. Obviously, I was preoccupied and not paying close enough attention, I guess. Well, long story short, the freezer door was cracked, and I didn't look at it for 2 or 3 days. And yeah, all the chicken thawed out. And by the time I went, I don't even know why I went in there to look at it. But yeah, I could see a bunch of, like, the ground had been wet but had dried. So it was pretty plain to see what had happened. I opened the door, the chicken had already started to stink a little bit. So I had to throw every single chicken away that I butchered this year, which was about, how many was it? It was probably close to 40 birds in there, because I actually had a couple from the previous year too. But it was all completely thawed. I mean, I thought, oh, maybe it's because the door was still like closed, but it was just cracked. And with an upright freezer, that's all it takes. And I went around feeling them all, and like maybe I could find one that was still frozen, and no, they were all like warm. I mean, it was such a waste. So I ended up throwing every single chicken away, just because, obviously not safe to eat at that point. So, new animals, yeah, we got another batch of meat birds coming next week, actually. They're supposed to show up on Monday. So I only got 25 this time. I didn't get, what did I get last time? 40 or 50. And I think 25 is a little bit, probably more of a realistic number just for our family. When I was getting more than that, I would give some away. I would sell some to people. But just for us, which is, kind of what the goal was with this second batch, 25 ought to be enough. And, I'm just so, I just wish that whole day just didn't happen, yeah. So anyway, those are the new animals coming. Not anything too exciting, just some more meat birds. As far as like anything else, we don't need any more bulls for a while. I don't typically buy cows just because I will keep the cows that I breed. So yeah, really like poultry, I guess, are the animals that kind of come and go and like that. Yeah, it was honestly losing the chicken, like that did suck, but uh, you know, considering what had already happened that night, I didn't really care that much about the chicken, but it was just kind of like an extra little, you know, yeah, yeah. So anyway, that's where we're at with that. We get to go through all the butchering and all that again, but at least I've got a nice scalder now, and I'm set up a little bit better to do it. I'm gonna also do it a little bit differently with this batch. So in the past, I would always get so many meat birds that I would raise them here in the brooders because I built those 4x8, the big brooders. And when I was getting like 40, 50 chicks, that's what I needed. But since this batch is only 25, I'm thinking to keep them at my house. I don't know if it's going to be in the shop or where it'll end up being, but somewhere at the house. And then I'm going to order another poultry net, and I want to try to, as soon as I can, get them out on grass, because that was one thing I had intended to do with this group, but the timing of when they showed up and things had already started drying out here, and there wasn't really like good pasture to put them on. But at my house, I can put them like where we have our fruit trees or somewhere over there. So that'll be a good spot. And I know that was something that I really wanted to do this year, was to have actually like legit pasture poultry, not, I guess, I don't know what you would call it, the way I was doing it before. They weren't confined, but they were indoors. And I know that a lot of birds, if they have the choice, would choose to be indoors, but nice to give them the option, plus when they're on grass, they stay cleaner, and they say the meat quality is much better. So this will actually be a good experiment. We'll see if that's a bunch of marketing or if there's actually something to that. We're going to find out. And then, we'll just be honest, with the last batch, I took them way too far. They were like 3 months old, maybe older. And those chickens you can harvest at like 6 to 8 weeks of age. So that's the goal with this batch, is to really do it more kind of by the book, so to speak, how you're supposed to do it. Um, so yeah, that's the newest addition that's coming is meat birds. Canning videos, we don't really do much canning. We do more freezing. Um, and like that's really not my department. And maybe we could get a camera in the kitchen while Bree's working on that sort of thing, because she does all that stuff. That's we that's actually another thing that probably bears mentioning. When I was showing videos where I was butchering chickens, a lot of people kind of came after her saying that she should be helping me. And, some people were not especially nice about their comments. And I feel like most of you get it, but for those that don't, the way that we operate is that I have my jobs and she has hers, right? Her primary job is raising the kids, which one might argue is the most important job, right? I take care of things here, she takes care of things there, and it's not to say that there's never crossover, because of course there is. In fact, before we had kids, she would be in the corrals helping me with the cows every time. But now, and kind of off subject, but that's a big reason why I wanted to improve that fence in the corral, so that I've got an enclosure now that is safe enough to have the family out there with me, because the kids are starting to get old enough where they can't like do anything, but they can be in there and kind of be a part of that. But I wouldn't even let Bree go back in there with the rinky-dink setup I had before. So yeah, the idea of her helping with the chickens is just kind of ridiculous, because we got scalding hot water, we got sharp knives everywhere, we got gut buckets. Like, that's not a good environment for a 3-year-old to be, right? And I mean, we don't really do babysitters, so that's just not, we just don't really do that. So I'm sure the people that were attacking her saying that she needs to be helping me are not on this live stream. So I apologize if it feels like I'm scolding you. I'm sure it's not you, but there were people out there that were saying some things that weren't right. And, I've said this before, just because Bree's not in the videos, it doesn't mean she's sitting at home twiddling her thumbs. She's got 2 kids to take care of and homeschool, and all the other things that kind of go along with that, not to mention the fact of all the work that she does for me. Like, I don't like this is more embarrassing for me, but something that she can kind of hang her hat on with our kids. Like, I maybe changed 5 diapers, and I have 2 kids, so that can kind of demonstrate how the workload is divided between us. But I don't ever do laundry, I don't ever have to cook, I don't have to worry about anything except my job here. So again, I know this is probably falling on ears that don't need to hear it, but that was a little upsetting, and usually when we see stuff like that come through, the policy is just ignore it, but I don't know, something like that. I mean, you guys get it. Somebody comes after your spouse, you got to say something, So anyway, but as the kids get older and the seasons of life change, well, like, that's going to change too. And like I said, going back to the corral project here, this will be a good way to get them out there with me in a place that is safe, because obviously that is like the primary concern with cattle. I don't worry about myself so much, because I guess just because I've been around them forever, I know I can climb a fence quickly, and I can read their behavior just because I've been around them so much. I know, like, do I need to be cautious around this cow, judging by how she's acting, or calf, or whatever it might be. The kids don't know that yet. They will learn it, but they don't know it yet. And honestly, I don't think Bree's been around them enough yet to really be able to read their behavior, and get out of Dodge if necessary. So yeah, that's where we are with that. Yeah, sorry. I know. Silence, it's a great thing to have on a live stream, right? Yeah, I know some people, they operate differently and everybody kind of helps with everything, but that's, we just don't do it that way. We kind of just take on the roles where we feel like we do best, and that's what works for us. So, oh, Barbara Barrier, you're going to get me in trouble with that question. She's asking if I've ever finished the slab for the outdoor kitchen, and the answer is no. I haven't even looked at it since that last video. It's something that I know I need to do, but again, it's kind of like the Jubilee. It's like, when it's done, I'll use it, but I've gotten along without it for this long, so it's kind of hard to make it a priority. The form is more or less done for the concrete. I do need to dig it out a little bit more, and since it's been ignored for months now, probably need to check on, just make sure everything is squared up like where it needs to be. But I think I had some last minute sort of rethinking the plan, because I kind of had it figured out how I was going to do it, and then I started thinking like, well, and mostly it's a slab. I was trying to get the slab perfectly sized for 2 yards of concrete, because that's the easiest quantity that I can move over here. But at 2 yards, it was still gonna be like 2 or 3 feet away from our septic tank, which obviously I don't want to pour on top of the tank, but then it kind of seemed silly to just have this 3-foot gap between the tank and the slab where just nothing was. So then, I don't know, I hemmed and hawed about it. Well, do I want to make it like a 3-yard pour, which is probably what I'll end up doing, just because it seems not, it doesn't seem like a good idea to just leave that gap there. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with that, is just figuring out where I want to go with that pour. Because once the pour is done, then I think we're thinking about doing like a freestanding roof structure, and then just moving the smoker over there, and we got like a griddle and barbecue, all that kind of outdoor cooking stuff, just move it over there. So, and actually, if you know about pouring concrete, then you know that during the summertime is not really the best time to pour it. You can do it, but it's really better when the temperatures are a little bit lower and the concrete can cure a little bit more slowly. So let's just say I'm waiting for that. But certainly need to get the form completely done and ready to go, so that when the weather is favorable, it's just a matter of going out there and pouring it and finishing it and doing all that. Yeah, okay, so I knew I was gonna get this. I've been getting it. People, they want more cows, and I understand that. But what you have to understand is that this time of year, there's just not a lot happening with the cows. Really, all we're doing is like moving pastures. And as long as nobody's getting sick, hurt, or injured in any kind of way, other than moving pastures, there's just not going on, or not a lot going on with them. So I know that people want the cow content, but it's just, I don't really know what to give you at this is the time of year when I'm going around doing all the other stuff to get ready for when the cows are needing a lot of attention. I just want everything to be ready to go for that. So that's why in the last month, it's been a lot of shop projects, a lot of building stuff. Just because honestly, this is like the only time of year that I can do a lot of that stuff. With the corral, for example, a lot of the year ooh, sorry, wasp just wanted to come kiss me on the nose or something. But yeah, most times of the year, I can't tear that corral apart because I'm either needing it or going to need it soon, or it's wet, and I just don't like doing outdoor welding projects when it's wet, just for the safety aspect of it all. So yeah, a lot of people wonder, why am I out here doing all this welding in the summertime? Well, it's because it's the only time I can really get out there, and there's like a stretch of several months where, we're kind of, usually it's when you get over the pink eye. When you kind of get ahead of pink eye, if you're having a bad year with it, then that's probably the last thing that you're gonna need to run them through there for a while. So kind of got to take advantage of that window and take care of these projects that are needing to be done. Because the worst thing would be to like need to get a cow in the chute, but not really able to do it because I've got everything torn apart. So the next, let's see. Yeah, coal cows. I did see somebody ask about coal cows, so I'll talk about that for a minute, because that'll probably be the next thing that you see me do with the cows, other than moving pastures. Who's gonna get cold this year? And there's a couple that I know for sure, and there's a couple that I know are maybes. So the for sure is gonna be number 16. She just never had a calf this year. I don't know why she didn't, but she didn't. And we're late enough now where she won't. Then we got number 45. I saw the bulls riding her again the other night, so I know that there's something going on. A lot of people said, oh, get a vet out there to see what's going on. And, here's the truth of it. At this point, it doesn't really matter what's going on with her. What matters is that she's not bred. And even if, like, let's say I could get a vet out here, like, oh, she's got this. Here's a magical shot that will cure her immediately. Well, so now she's getting bred in September. That doesn't work for my operation. So she's gonna be on that trailer too. So that makes, what did I say? Number 16, number 45. So there's two of them. Number 33 is the cow that had the real bad calf pull. I think that calf was breached, or he had his head turned around. That's what it was. Had his head turned around. So that was the cow that had a really tough pull with her. So she's gonna go as well. Because of that, I suspect that she could have gotten injured with her reproductive parts. Not for sure. And I could get her preg checked, I suppose. But you must remember, cow number 33, I do not like because she's not, I don't know quite how to say it, but she's the cow where when I'm working everybody and everybody's going the right way, she's the one that decides to split off the herd, run the other way, and wreck the whole operation. She's very difficult to work because she is that bad combination of being very stubborn, slightly aggressive, and not afraid of me. So, yeah, wasp, sorry. If you ever see me do this, it's because of a wasp. Maybe you guys can see him, I don't know. But yeah, so she's that combination that I don't like. And she yeah, now that she missed a calf this year, this is a good reason to send her down the road. Plus, she's in great body condition, and butcher cow prices are pretty good right now. So it's a good year to let her go. So yeah, what is that? Is that 3 or 4? 16, 45, I think 33. That's 3. Okay, the question that kind of jogged this discussion was cow number, what is she, 26. That's the cow that I had to assist the calf with nursing this year. She, believe it or not, is on the maybe pile. And I know I'll probably regret, if I keep her, I'll regret it. I just know. She's a Karen. That's a good way to put it. Yeah, number 33 is a Karen. But number 26, I kind of try to stick with a number of culls that I don't want to go over because I need to maintain some sort of numbers with my mother cows here. I've got 3 replacement heifers coming in that are getting bred right now. So to keep things stable, I should only be sending 3 cull cows to the sale. All right, you follow me on that? This year that may not happen. We may end up going like 4 or 5, which would ultimately bring the number of bred cows down for next calving season. And if that happens by like 2 or 3 head, I'm not too worried about it, but I don't want to go much more than that. So I've got like a number of culls basically that I don't want to go beyond. So what we do then is let's say our number is 5, okay, for sake of discussion. I'll go through and I'll look at my for sures. So like number 16, that's a for sure. Didn't have a calf. Everyone else had a calf but her, so something's up with that. So she's a for sure. Number 26, on the other hand, will very likely give me a calf in the spring if I keep her, right? So if it comes down to sending number 26 down the road or sending like number 45, who almost certainly will not have a calf for me next year, well, then we're going to send 45 and just know that number 6 or 26 is going to give us some problems, but she'll also give us a calf. So that's what puts her on the maybe pile. And I know some people will say, no, you should just get rid of her. Maybe you're right. But we got to go through and see what's what with all the rest of them, and just kind of prioritize who's going to go based on why they would be going. And right now, she's got her issues for sure, but she also has one thing going for her, and that is that I'm fairly certain she'll give me a calf in the spring, and I can't say that for all these girls. So that puts her at least above them. Now, if there's only like 3 that are open, or I suspect strongly will be open, then she probably will go on the trailer with them. But if there's, I've talked about, and I should do it, but you know how it goes. I should preg test these cows, right? And I know that can be done with a palpation. I'm not experienced. I've done that before, but I'm not experienced enough with it to sell a cow based off of my determination of open or bred. So what I think I would rather do is, because I have a small enough herd here, I suspect it would be difficult to get somebody here to do it. But also, I don't really like working on other people's schedule. I like working on my schedule. So for my schedule, what would be easier would be to take blood samples on all the cows and send them into a lab. I've talked about this several times before, and I always probably say the same thing, is that I know a couple people have done it, and I need to talk to them about it, just kind of get their take on it. But the big disadvantage that I see is that you don't get an answer that day. So it's like you're going to run everybody through the chute, get your blood samples, send them in, and a couple days, however long it takes them later, you'll get your, if she's pregnant or not, answer. And then you would have to go back and gather up those cows if you knew you didn't want to keep them. And, you know, which for me, honestly, is not a huge deal because I'm on small acreage. It's not like I'm taking their blood sample and then sending them out on a 50,000 acre range and then I have to go find them again. You know, like they're right here. So it's not that big of a deal. The bigger deal is just running them through and gathering blood samples from everybody. You know, that'd probably take me maybe most of a day, I'm guessing, but it gave me a lot of good information too. So, and it might be a cool process to show you guys, you know, like if you watch Country View Acres, I'm pretty sure this is the system he used to preg check his cows, because I know they were taking blood samples and sending them off. So there might be several different labs that do this. There's just one that I know of. So I think, yeah, I think I need to get more serious about doing that. And then that would give you guys some excellent cow content. We could go through and see how good of a job the boys did this year. And I think they did all right. I don't get the bulls tested prior to breeding, which is probably foolish. I probably should do that, but that's also why I run 2 bulls. And because if that guy got serious there, sorry about that. But that's why I run 2 bulls. 1 bull could breed all my cows, no problem. We're on small acreage. He'll be able to detect them going into heat. I think Rivet could do all of them by himself, and be fine. In fact, I'm not so sure that that's not what happened last year, but I keep a second bull in there with them as a backup. So, so that's why I don't get them checked prior to breeding. But again, it probably would be a smart thing to do, especially down the road when I am going to need to separate the herd for breeding. Then it would really be a smart thing to do, because if one bull's not, you know, firing right, then half the cows are not going to be bred, or they'll be bred later when I put everybody back together. And that's difficult too, because when cattle get off cycle, it can be tough to get them back on. So that is, yeah, that's something that probably should happen in the future. Oh man, how long have I been going? Oh man, almost 2 hours, a little over 2 hours. Wow. Well, that's got to be the longest live stream I've done by far. All right, well, man, I see, there's still 594 of you on here. I appreciate you guys sticking with me. I don't know how many of you were here for the whole thing, but we went extra long today. I hope everybody that has wanted to catch a live stream live got to do it, because I know, and this is another thing that I know people don't like when I do it, but I only give you like 20 minutes notice of when I'm gonna go live. And the reason I do that, it's not because I'm trying to mess with you or anything. It's just because the way my schedule is, I often don't know exactly when I'm gonna be able to do it. So that's why the short notice. But I guess what I will say is that, you know, if my video doesn't come out on one of the predetermined days, Tuesday, Thursday, or Saturday, that there will be a live stream coming that afternoon. And it's usually around 12 to 2 o'clock, sometime in the afternoon. But I even had someone email me today, like, when's the live stream gonna be? And I still didn't know this morning, so I had to email him pretty much. I think I answered that email like right before I put out the community posts, which hopefully you guys saw it. But if not, then, well, you found it one way or another because you're here. So, and you know, live streams you can always watch on a replay as well. So, but yes, I think I'm going to wrap it up here. I'm about to lose my voice, I think. I know I get accused of talking a lot in my videos, but you got to remember that's spread out over the course of a day or sometimes 2 days. This is all at once, so it's a little tougher. So thank you guys. I very much appreciate you hanging out with me this afternoon, and I hope to catch you on the next one.